Kindness Can, the podcast, with radio personality Jane Lindley Thomas and psychologist Paul Bushell. Because every act of kindness, no matter how big or small, can change lives. In this series, Jane and Paul hope to enrich your life by giving you practical tools on how to be kinder in your relationships with yourself, with those around you, at home, work, and in your community.
Welcome to season 2 of the Kindness Can podcast. I'm joined with my very dear friend, psychologist Paul Bushell, and co-founder of Kindness Can. My love, hello.
The joy it brings me when I hear you say season 2 of the Kindness Can podcast. We have waited way too long to have this conversation, and what a joy to be back.
Absolutely. From myself, Jane Lindley Thomas, we are just absolutely thrilled to be back in the saddle. So, babes, I mean, it's been a long time since we've connected. How's it been?
Well, I think for, like everyone, it's been a roller coaster. I think in the wake of everything that's happened in the world, in South Africa, in Durban, I think there's just been so much to process. And that's probably a really good place to start this podcast today, talking about where have we been, the Kindness Can podcast, over the last 18 months. And why has it taken us so long to have this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we chat every day in our personal capacity. But I don't know
My
how
best days are when it's more than once.
Oh, me too. I've got to say, I feel the same. But I've got to say, I don't know how you feel, but there seems to be a general feeling of sheer exhaustion. I mean, I don't think it's very out of the ordinary given the time of year, but it feels compounded. I think we've been running on adrenaline for so long in survival, coming out of the pandemic, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we have to make up for lost time. And I don't know what your diary looks like, but sometimes my diary looks quite atrocious.
Sure. I think it was such a global trend for all of us coming out of the pandemic to want to catch up, to make up for lost time, to make money, to get out there, to connect eye to eye in rooms. And I think we burnt a whole bunch of energy in the pandemic, obviously, trying to be adaptable and survive and resilient and agile, all that traversing we were doing. And then we came out like a wound up spring, jack in the box, and we were like, right, let's live life again. And what little energy we had was spent on this firework moment that it's impossible for us not right now, even a year, 18 months after that moment, to still be feeling kind of tired and depleted. I think searching for words is a phrase that often comes to mind for me, kind of like trying to process and find the words to describe what has been.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I don't feel like I have the muscle like I used to. Part of me thinks back into those days of the pandemic and just remembers, I mean, it was very terrifying. And I think that probably the adrenaline that was running through all of us, wondering, are we going to die? Are we going to live through this? Are people going to be okay? Still catches me when I think about it. But life just seemed so uncomplicated back then. Your diary was empty because you were at home with your people. And now you've got to be so mindful of your yeses and your nos. Because I know for me, in the facilitation work that I'm doing, particularly with women, is putting a lot of emphasis on what are you saying yes to? Because when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And being mindful around that. I catch myself too. I don't know if it's as women, and maybe it's men as well, we fall into the space of wanting to do it all, or people pleasing, or maybe it's the old adage of having to have worked so hard to get a place at the table that every opportunity that comes around, we want to be involved. There is that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. We hear it time and time again. But I heard the other day that cup actually has to overflow. Because the cup is for you. The overflow is for other people. But when we're saying yes and yes and yes and pedestalizing this busy lifestyle because that's what success has looked like, it's no wonder we feel depleted.
Sure. I kind of have this analogy in my mind, and I love the cup analogy. You know, our work over the last 2 years, as we've gone around this Kindness Can, connecting eye to eye, heart to heart with people in rooms, and what a joy that has been. And we can't wait to share some of those experiences and the things that we've learned from that time with you as well. But as much as we want to talk about kindness in different parts of our life, you and I keep coming back to how important this relationship with self is. And the analogy of the cup being you and the stuff that fills that cup being energy, being life, which works in an ebb and flow. It comes and it goes. You spend it and you receive it, and you've got to manage the balance on that. But another analogy that comes to mind for me, where we find ourselves in a post-pandemic world, is almost the sort of like pendulum that's swinging from side to side. So during the pandemic, we swung to a very extreme, and that was released. And now we kind of swung to another extreme of super busyness and trying to put ourselves out there. And it's kind of this backwards and forward. And I suppose that's where this phrase, trying to find a new normal, comes from for all of us. We're trying to define how is normal? How do we want our life to look? And I think the last 2 years for me, and I think for lots of other people as well, has been kind of this like ebb and flowing, this trying to figure out, and that in itself, trying to define what is my normal, what is my baseline of how I want it to look, what are my dreams, what is my dream life, I suppose. That's exhausting. So we go through this very heavy experience. It draws a lot of energy. We come running hot out the blocks. That burns a lot of energy. And then after that, and that's where we are now, we're still trying to define this and make sense of it. And I hope through this podcast series, we can share some little nuggets, some little wisdoms that maybe you and I have learned in our own pendulum swinging from left to right and trying to define how we want our lives to look.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, working with you not only as a human, but as a psychologist, and really coming to the realization through the work with Kindness Can, that I am in a relationship with myself, has been earth-shatteringly, I can't even put it into words because it's changed my life in such a profound way. You know, when we speak about that and you get the whole room going like, what? And then you say it again. I want to repeat that. You are in a relationship with yourself. And if we think about all the energy that we put into all the other relationships, into our community, our family, our work life, how much of that is going to self? I mean, I wonder how many people listening to this podcast right now have looked at themselves in the mirror and said recently, I'm so proud of you. Look how far you've come.
Well, I mean, on that note, I think for myself, when thinking about where you and I have been since our last podcast recording, and what has the last 18 months, 2 years been filled with, what have we been doing in our work and our lives and making sense of stuff. Another thing that I was very conscious of is being very careful of the words that you choose. And we've got to really balance the narrative out of our experience. And that's not about wallpapering over it and kind of just seeking silver linings and turning it into this big positive thing, because no doubt there were parts of this whole experience that have been incredibly hard and painful and devastating. But also being very careful of choosing our words wisely, not only of how we make sense of the past, but how we want to move forward in the future. And I think that line, because you are in a relationship with yourself, dropping your anchor, slowing your world down, and looking yourself in the eyes sometimes and being like, geez, you can do hard things, in the words of Glennon Doyle, okay? I'm so proud of you. You've been so brave, and you can take that bravery with you into the future. Those are important words to be adding to your narrative as how you tell the story right now.
And maybe sometimes there aren't even words. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said that they get home after a day and they don't have words. And I think life it's pulling us in different directions. You know, we're trying to maintain the relationship with self. We're trying to, if you're a parent, you're trying to keep that boat buoyant. You're trying to, or I know for me, I've got, the 3 kids, and I've got my home life, I've got my work life, and then I've got my relationship with myself life. And some days I drop a ball, juggling, drop a ball. But I love to remind people that it's okay if you drop the balls. We're all dropping balls, and sometimes they don't smash, they roll under the couch.
Sure.
And that's also okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for all of us, it's really important, for you and me, Jane, and for you listening to this podcast. It's okay if you're still finding your words to describe what you've been through, where you're at the moment. And just a reminder to all of us, if you haven't recently checked in with yourself, because you are in a relationship with you, we're going to say that a lot, I know, in this podcast, a lot, because it's so true and we need to hear it. It always amazes me, and it doesn't amaze me, when we're in a room with adults And it is sometimes the first time they've heard that or thought about that.
Yeah.
And we're on a mission to change that, because there is enough time in the day to have a relationship with you, even if it's just 5 minutes at the beginning or the end. But if you, just a reminder to you to check in with you and take some time to process what you've been going through, because it has been a lot. And in this season, Jane and I look so forward to sharing that wisdom that we've collected and the experiences and stories we've collected with you, and hopefully that it can inspire some positive change.
Absolutely. And I think for me, just some like final words, and it's always so moving to see how these words land in a room. Just to reiterate 2 things actually. The first thing is that you are doing so much better than you think. I'm going to say that again.
Say it.
You are doing so much better than you think. And the second is that you are worthy of living a life full of joy and love and deep connection. Until we connect again, I'm sending you so much love. Just to remind you that Kindness Can do facilitation and workshop work within the corporate and school space. And if you're a brand that would love to get involved with our podcast, feel free to drop Diane an email. That's diane@ecr.co.za. From myself, Jane Lindy Thomas.
And me, Paul Bushell.
Until next time, lots of love. Go well.
You've been listening to Kindness Can, the podcast. Find out more at kindnesscan.co.za.